All right. Hi, my name's Josh Slighting. I look after all things data and digital audience at Network 10. Been here for the better part of the last 2.5 to 3 years as we've gone through a lot of our transformation, setting up new departments, and essentially transforming the way that we use, collect, manage, and leverage data across our business. So built up a bit of an agenda for today. Just thought we'd start a little differently in terms of what the future actually looked like for us. We'll take you through a bit of our transformation, where brand and data collide. Essentially, we are a brand mechanism as a TV network, and we've got a lot of experience that we'd like to share some of those learnings and takeaways with you at the end. So our business has gone through, I guess, a macro transformation, coming under the Viacom CBS portfolio a couple of years ago. And in our kind of family, looking bottom up, our local channels include 10 Shake, 10 Bold, Peach, Play and Speaks are our digital formats, so podcasting service and our on-demand service for video. And then our kind of company of studios and networks includes Showtime, Paramount, Comedy Central, MTV. They're really good global brands, and we're starting to operate on much more of a global stage now across the world. Before, I guess, to go into any of the meaty content, it'd probably be good to show everyone a bit of a sizzle reel. This is something we do to promote some of our content, but it'll give you a sense if you don't know 10 and you don't know some of our shows, who and what we are.
I promise you, we are going to create something really special. Really special. I'm a celebrity. Get me out of here!
Here on home soil for the Amazing Race Australia.
Survivors ready? Survivors ready? They won't know what's hit them.
We are going to create something really special.
All right, so lots for us to look forward to. So we'll jump straight in, kind of give you a sense of what the future looks like for us. You'll probably hear some stuff from the trade press, but maybe I can give you a bit of an internal insight into that. So I guess the kind of really big thing for us this year is the launch of Paramount Plus. We've had CBS All Access historically. Paramount Plus is essentially a mountain of entertainment. It's working with the world's. The other part we've been working a lot on has been a massive overhaul of our 10Play app ecosystem. So there's a bit of an illustration going on here. It's sound. This is really just showing kind of the premium setup, design, flow, the way our content is curated and presented, but very importantly, the way that it shows across all of our different. And then if I talk more from a data perspective, it's the concept of essentially actionable intelligence. And what that really means for us is, when we've got all these data sources that we're curating and collecting, how ready to query are they? So how much transformation work do you have to do? We really want things to be in a ready to query state. We're striving constantly for greater efficiency. So there's lots of automation in that that's going on all the time. And then importantly, if you think about it for our consumers across the business, it's our ability to tell better stories through data so that the data becomes a lot more useful and relatable, but also that people across our business can have insights at their fingertips. And we're investing a lot in visualizing data. We're investing in kind of scaling out those things. So we've gone from having a smaller focused team, but really wanting everyone across the business to have access to at least the most basic insights to do their jobs. So that's going to be really exciting for us. And then if you think about from a real business user's perspective, what does it mean to be truly data driven? We've already just scratched the surface on what that looks like from our formative years of transforming and becoming data driven. So ask us in some key business question ways, which is, if we were to try and predict with greater confidence and certainty how many people would watch MasterChef in the next season, that would give us huge benefit. It would allow us to forecast properly. It would allow us to manage the relationships with the advertisers and integration partners. It would allow us to manage things with the production company and even from our sales team. So having a very confident view, or being able to do that with greater accuracy and confidence, is be really, really important, and leveraging our data to do that. Second one, from a commercial perspective, trying to map out what your growth in digital ad revenue could be over the next 2, 3, 4 years. We're always trying to, grow revenues across all the different streams. Doing something like that with the data that we have would be very powerful. And then if we were going to invest in an amazing new show, and to try and work out what the ROI would be on that with greater certainty. So we do things like this today. Of course, all businesses do things like this today, but our ability to do it with greater confidence and relying on the information that we're doing that is going to generate the results we're predicting is where we really ultimately aspire to. So this is just moving beyond data-driven at a customer touch point, data-driven in terms of an advertising touch point. It's those kind of things, and then scaling them out later on. So some of the key changes that we've gone through, from not that many years ago, if you think about, the timeline of technology evolution, we had the iPhone launch in 2006 or something, and so fast tracking from there. 2013, in terms of content on demand, it was largely limited to websites. There were some applications for these things, but they weren't very prevalent across mobile apps. If you fast forward through to 2021, just the sheer scale, not just of the applications that are there and the ways in which you can watch content, because it's across so many different touch points, but in our ecosystem, we're also going against a huge increase in content owners and streaming service owners, and everyone's now competing for the biggest screen in the house. So before you had computers, that's all changing. You had mobile phones, that's all changing. Now we've got that whole big ecosystem there, and about 63% of our total viewing is happening on a connected TV screen, on a big screen. So you think about the change in way people are watching content, the type of content that they're watching, and the sheer volume of competition. We're adding Paramount Plus to this mix here, which is not really represented. If you took a global view of this, it's exponentially greater. So much more challenging space for us to operate in. And then in terms of the way people are engaging these shows, there's some numbers I thought might be quite useful. So just showing kind of that increase in platforms that are now showing on each of these screens. For us personally, on 10play, our viewing has gone up nearly 4-fold in the last 3 years. That's pretty significant. So we're seeing audiences transition away from traditional TV viewing, but we're also seeing a much bigger uptick of premium platform technologies and that on-demand consumption. With that, 36% of our revenues are going up each year, and that's an annual figure, so they do fluctuate, but as a steady course over the past few years, the 36% annual growth in revenue. And then more recently, a stat released by Morgan kind of illustrated about 17 million Australians are accessing a premium subscription video on demand service. So that's including the likes of Netflix, Stan, etc. 17 million people. It's a pretty insane number when you think about it like that. I personally have 10 paid subscription services, so very, very high. And then the Australian population accessing broadcast video on demand services, so the likes of 10play, 7plus, 9now, etc. 80% of people are using those type of platforms to access that content nowadays, which is pretty enormous. And then I think something that's not won't be a strange to anyone, which is, we've been talking about a cookie apocalypse, or the end of third-party cookies coming at the end of this year. We're currently going through Apple's privacy changes and navigating what that looks like for our industry. Again, this is not a 10 specific thing. This is not a locally specific thing. This is a global thing, which is quite interesting to go through, think about the whole industry. And we probably expect that there'll be bigger changes coming to Android devices in the not too distant future. If you look at how that started in the web environment, we'd probably assume it followed a similar course in mobile and connected TV type devices. So I guess the key thing is, how did we get to where we are today? And we talked a little bit about some of our results and the scale, but we've been through a bit of a journey. I'd like to give you an insight into that. So back in 2018, the market was fiercely competitive, especially on data. There was what we described as a bit of a data arms race. And we established that we needed a data strategy. So that was our CEO at the time. We needed a data strategy. We're going to start this journey. Fast forward to essentially 1 year later, we'd onboarded a foundation team. We'd built a brand new data department that looked after things like monetization, analytics, managing some of our technical platforms because we'd adopted a bunch of new technologies. We'd rebuilt Template on the website. So we kind of kicked off this transformation journey, as it were. Then about 6 months later, we'd got our first scalable data asset live on the website. So we'd done some basic things through the year, but it was the first time we'd had people logging in, a fairly comprehensive data layer with different events feeding different analytics platforms and audiences. We were live. We were live on a platform, and we could start to do something with that in the market too. Then 2020 was really just our year of absolute acceleration. We call this Accelerate. So it's where we went from about 20% addressability all the way through to 80. We have a lot of platforms. I'll talk through that shortly. But it was a very important year for us in 2020. We rebuilt Template. We'd put data capabilities in a lot of places, and now we had an addressable asset that we could take to market so that people who wanted to target particular audiences in those type of environments could do so. That was really, really important thing for us. At the end, 2020 was key for us. Like how do we really recognize the success that we'd had? There's a few kind of key elements here. One was that ready to query concept meant that we had robust data collection across all these different platforms, and the scale and volume of our ecosystem and the complexity is quite challenging. So getting that ready to query space where we could answer questions like how many people logged in to watch MasterChef last night on a particular device. Now we can do that. Internally, we developed a lot more proficiency. This stuff is hard, getting skilled up in the right areas, knowing how to manage this complex stack that we built. And we still aren't perfect. We've got a lot of work to do to learn and grow. It's a very fast moving space, but we had a much higher degree of proficiency than we had the year before, which is a really good place for us to be in, because now we knew how to start to work with the toolkit that we had to make it work for us better. And then really nice point, which is you start to think about the commercial side of our business. We are a commercial free-to-air TV network where we make our money largely through advertising. We started to see that the trading and the demand and our ability to meet market demand was very well supported or underpinned by data. So a large part of our advertising, even if it was a fairly basic targeting parameter, like I'm a male aged 25 to 54, which is a very key buying demographic, that is a currency that we could now trade in. And so a very significant proportion, about 70% plus of our total digital ads are now powered by data, which is really good. And then 2021, this year is largely around fine tuning and expanding. So we've set up a lot of stuff. Now it's around, just making sure everything's working the way we need it to. We do have a very large focus on keeping our stack lean and making sure that we are constantly learning and knowing how to work with it in the best way. And the expanding part will be largely helping increasing number of business units across our organization with the data assets that we've got, because we've built it once. We can start to apply this into product marketing more effectively, and so on and so forth. So that expanding and scale of our data assets can be really, really great to do. And then this is just I guess I can just share some principles around the way that we'd architected our data strategy from the start. So for us, we're in a very competitive space, and I've said it's a bit of a data arms race. It's really important for us to inspire trust with people that we're going to work with. So if you're an advertising client and you want to target a particular audience intent, we want you to know that the quality and the pedigree of data that sits underneath is really, really good. Equally, for the teams that start to work with data, I'm going to go through a massive change. They used to work one way or with different partners and sources, and now we're starting to provide data, and we need to make sure that there was trust in that from the start. So some of the ground rules for us was making sure identity was at the forefront. It was identity by design. We've made sure that we match deterministically with everything. So we've never really employed things like IP addresses to kind of guess who people are. We get people to log into our platforms, and then we've got very powerful data architecture that ties it all together. We also invested with a CDP up front rather than relying on DMPs and those kind of technologies, which, as we're seeing today with changing tracking and changing privacy laws, was actually quite good. We had that control and a really solid foundation at the start. And then more from a security and governance perspective, it's very important that we had what I would describe as a driver's license, which meant that we weren't taking any shortcuts there, and we were definitely nailing the really important pieces. And then from a market perspective, we want it to be as open and accessible as possible. There's a lot of walled garden trading, especially in media. It's often hard to understand or trust where things are coming from and what things are made up of. We want to be as accessible and open as possible. And so just to give you a sense of the scale of our challenge around managing lots of different data. So all up, there's more than 40 different places we have to get data to and from. Big proportion of them are around the way people can watch 10 play. So there's currently 16 different apps and devices. We've got plans to onboard 3 new ones before the end of this year. That's just because there's a lot of technology consoles and stuff that are in the market. And as new ones come in, like Fire TV launched last year from Amazon, or someone watching MasterChef on their Apple iPhone, they watch it frequently, 3 times a week, they watch it on demand or live, etc., etc. So we've got a lot of the behavioral content consumption data that make up segments for ourselves. And then from a second party perspective, with those partners that we do partner with, people are often looking to target people in market. So we've got a very significant second party data asset of premium, well-matched segments for advertisers to reach the audiences that they want to. So someone in market to buy a house or car, a young family, people who have a specific spend threshold, because that's essentially how we help tailor audiences for advertisers. So there's a lot. We also have some third-party segments, but key to our strategies is kind of wind down our reliance on those. We're also focusing a lot on growing data visualization and storytelling. It's really important that data doesn't sit in platforms just in a data team at one part of our business. Making sure that it's nicely visualized, that people can have access to specific dashboards or insights, and that we start to tell stories about what our audience is doing and when they're watching our shows, how are they watching, what are they watching, etc. Then, really fun part, it all comes together for us in one nice clean data layer. So this is, I guess, the first primary plug for Tealium. This is a nice, I guess Tealium is very pivotal to our business in that we're collecting it from all of those different platforms. We use largely APIs. We've got some stuff on our website, but largely API driven, so a lot of server-side backend. And it's really, really well curated. So it's nice stateful data layer that goes everywhere across every touch point for our audience, which has been phenomenal. That way we can get data into each of the end platforms where we're activating or visualizing or storytelling, whatever it is that we're doing, it always looks the same. And that was so important to us from the beginning. Now I get to, I guess, the more interesting part, which is where brand and data collide, and we'll share some of our learnings across the way. So, you know, we are in a unique spot in that we're a television network. We get to work with brands on integrating really well into the content. We get to work on nice, clever advertising. We're coming up with lots of different creative ideas. And then we're slowly starting to see this rampant uptick of digital and especially data-driven targeting, and trying to get them all to mix can be quite challenging. So first kind of primary observation is that there's a lot more parity in the market now when it comes to data and insights. A long time ago, and I guess it still probably feels that way to an extent, there's very significant data that sits in the likes of Google and Facebook, and that no one's arguing with that. We've had a lot. But TV businesses like ourselves have been building a first-party rich asset and partnering with the likes of Flybuys and Cartology and Red Planet, and all these great businesses that have helped essentially add a lot more color to those audience. So before it was a black box, it was hard. It was like you're guessing based on a lot of panels only who would be watching a show or where's the best place for me to stick my money. It's hard. So having a lot more parity makes it a little bit easier for you to go, okay, well, I'm not super reliant on an individual business purely because they have data. Those businesses trying to leverage that into while building a brand, and it is quite challenging. We see when brands have we've got a strong brand strategy, sometimes the data overlay undercuts that. Sometimes it's very effective. We believe you can do both at the same time, and there's a way to look at it in terms of harmony, and there's a way to look at it in terms of conflict, and I'll talk about that shortly. So the first kind of key question I would ask is, what's the business goal? And therefore, what does success look like when you're running a campaign? Lowest cost denominator, as many touch points as possible. We want everyone to love our shows and come and watch them. But there may be people who are just never really going to watch 10. And so where should we be really investing our money? Asking ourselves those kind of hard questions around, am I optimizing towards the right thing? And does what I do today align well to that? It's a hard question to ask. I've used an illustrative example. This is meant to be ridiculous because it's an Aston Martin Vanquish 2020. It's an insane amount of money, not likely to apply. So I'm not picking on automotive manufacturers. I'm not picking on anyone. I just try to have a bit of fun with this this anecdote. So if I compare linear viewing to an on-demand viewing environment, so that's TV bought in the traditional sense, and then TV bought now where people are largely in digital environments, it's in apps. You're viewing on demand or on a live stream, fairly different. You could also extend this kind of view to websites and mobile apps and different platforms that you're trading in. But often there is very little, sometimes no differentiation between different environments. I know it is exceptionally hard to scale creatives. It is expensive, it's time consuming, but it doesn't always have to be the most crazy investment either. I think there's some practical things that you could do. So we took this fairly standard creative for the Vanquish, it's this little guest appearance by James Bond. You can anticipate a call to action that's something that it's drive away or it's a luxury feeling. The price point's going to be fairly high. But there is increased opportunity to do some testing with different creative variants and end frames, especially when it comes to digital and where you are starting to overlay targeting of audiences or against programs. So first example, there's multiple, I had some fun researching this. There's multiple models that are being sold at any one point in time. I know too in the car industry, you're generally trying to sell a particular model, a launch, etc. In this situation, there could be DBX that opens up their product category to young families, moms, etc., because the SUV category of this is particularly vibrant. DB11 might also fit a particular price point or niche or something to that effect. So there is some level of testing which doesn't rely on huge fundamental shifts to the creative entirely. You are able to highlight and show different pieces. Now, there's also increasing options around designing your own platform, and trying to leverage that into some of these digital environments is actually a lot easier than when you've done it in traditional TV targeting. And then advocating for things like services, care, and loyalty. One of the things we saw a lot through COVID was, a lot of the automotive advertising first pulled back. There was a lot of issues getting stock into the market like Australia because we don't have local manufacturing. But then you started to see some of the customer care advocacy pieces. I thought it was really interesting to see that change because people had always launched a new car model. It was come and buy my car. My car's the best car. It's very features, functions driven. The brand component behind that is fairly challenged. So that interesting slot on, or a different take on building and securing a premium relationship with the loyal customer, especially in the high-end brands, is quite powerful. So I know it's not the easiest thing to do. There are different ways, but where we're seeing some successes where there are some iterative changes, leveraging these type of environments to greater effect. And then you flip the coin, you can go, some brands have adopted what I would call over-targeting. Again, this is meant to be fairly jovial. It's a bit of a, it's meant to make people laugh, but hopefully get you thinking. So sometimes we can find ourselves guilty of over-targeting audiences. If you look at a mechanism like television, especially on demand, it's largely meant for driving up brand. It's meant for a long-term relationship. You can do short-term tactics, and they're obviously effective, but we can almost find ourselves guilty of getting married to the short-term pieces because they do tie up nicely with immediate sales impact and sales results. What you do have is kind of diminishing returns because it's the same cost for the creative production. It is then squeezing those into the most minute audiences might find you reaching 10,000 impressions or something like that, which doesn't really justify the expense that goes into building such a really premium asset and creative that goes into creating these really nice ads. So it is a careful balance. With lots of that increased data becomes a bit more challenging complexity, but there's a very fine balance between building a brand over time and then short-term tactics that may undermine some of the brand building that you're trying to do. So there's some really good examples of great work. Unsurprising, look at a brand like Nike. Nike does brand probably more effectively than most people. Now, there are lots of strengths in their commerce and their performance piece, but one thing they've never really compromised is brand. And they've stood behind some really prominent causes recently, and they do this on a global scale. They stand for something. And it really does carry through a feel into all of their other tactics that they employ from a marketing perspective. Another, I guess, more local view is someone like IAG. So huge investment in really rebuilding the brand. And for an insurance company, that's a big challenge. Like it's quite hard to do that. And then this is, I guess, a more tangible example of things that we see in our own space that we're starting to see adopted. So there are increasing number of tools available in digital video type environments and premium video environments. QR codes, I'm sure everyone talks about these all the time. I'll just focus on the use case here, which is what this is really showing. I think the potential for is for brands to leverage their own personalization tactics and efforts with consumer relationships that they have. So you're using a brand mechanism like TV, have something like a QR code where you can scan your own mobile device. There is a fantastic opportunity for you to personalize that user's experience when they're opening your app as a commerce provider. I think that's very powerful. So it just kind of simplifies, I guess, or removes some of that pressure to try and over personalize or overcomplicate some of the creative delivery when you're building a creative ad for a TV environment or for somewhere else. And then that connection point between what a person is seeing on the TV and the personalized experience that they've had with you in the past or currently is very, very powerful. So I think we'll see a lot more in this space over the coming months and years. And then, we work with flybys, and it's really, really smart stuff that we're starting to do. So, flybys have this business division that they've developed called Unpacked by Flybys. What they're essentially helping marketers do is one, measure their investment in media more effectively, and especially on retail and CPG brands because of the nature of the data that they're collecting from people. They're then allowing people to target segments that are people who are in market to buy particular products or services, or people who are churning or lapsing, etc., as customers. So it's giving. And just to close off, I've kind of gone through a lot of stuff here. I want to share some of our absolute key learnings. Take these away entirely. So first and foremost, really important to find that balance between short-term and long-term tactics and strategies, and just knowing what the real drivers are for your business. And sometimes there's that immediacy, and it's you can't always help those. And often, as marketers or advertisers, we bear the responsibility of trying to help instigate sales because the business is under some pressure. Completely get that. Understanding that balance and being able to test and talk, I guess, about this more effectively and to manage up and down across the board is going to be really, really important. Second one I would say here is just making sure that your investment is not overly concentrated in any one particular area.